Is the American dream still alive? That is the question that we are going to answer, or attempt to answer, in this video. Last year, we released 2 videos explaining why we wouldn't choose to go back to the UK, and that sparked a lot of discussion and reactions. It was a video that was quite divisive in terms of the reaction, in whether it resonated, which we found it did resonate with a lot of people, but also people that on the other side got very defensive as well and didn't like what we were saying. But there was a very interesting, amongst all the comments, there was a particular comment that I read recently that Ant and I were discussing for quite a bit, and we actually thought we would share that comment with you and share some of our thoughts on that, because it was an interesting topic for us.
I would start off by saying that for me, the American dream, not being an American but looking in on it, is a moving target. Isn't the right word, but it's something that moves and changes over time, like everything in life.
So it's not something that's
it can't be static. It can't be static. So what is appropriate for one time is not appropriate for another time, and that's can even be simple things like language. Language you used 50 years ago may not be appropriate for today. Of course, when people are measuring this, if you're measuring it from a static point with a static phrase, of course. And I think Americans can understand that your constitution has amendments. There's a reason why there's an allowance for amendments. So we're not saying on this day in 1948, this matches up to that. So it's an interpretation of the modern American dream, really, for us.
At least for us, but I get that a lot of you watching this will say, no, I think the American dream was exactly what it was in the 1960s. So this particular comment was actually in reaction to the retirees that had commented on our video. And we were really pleased, because we come from a perspective of living here for 3 years, and we were simply sharing our observations given our backgrounds and our experiences from the UK moving here.
And we are ignorant, really, to America. As much as we travel, we enjoy it, we like it here, and we now live here, we aren't Americans. We haven't been brought up in the American system. We don't have American parents where we'd know what they said and our grandparents said. So we appreciate we're coming from an entirely ignorant point. But then that does give us a kind of right to have the perspective of what it feels like coming here as immigrants to the country, and what we get back from it. With
all those common cliches. But what was nice was having people that actually have been born and raised here or moved here many years ago contribute and also give their experience. And amongst that were people that have actually retired now, because debunking some of the myths, because we can't say.
It's really nice when you have informed people that have been through it, that give context and real life examples that we simply don't have access to. So a lot of the comments and stuff I don't really pay much attention to across our videos. Selena does all that work. But this was really interesting for me, because we had so many people that had lived that life or were now retired that can talk to that entire journey, which was good.
But in reaction to that, there was a comment, and I'm going to read the comment. So this was from, I think this is from Mariah, and she mentioned she's an American from Atlanta, and she said, this was a really insightful video. I will say the comments about retiring are interesting. Be wary when you meet boomers and Gen X enjoying retirement with lots of investments and retirement savings, because that is a lost dream for millennials, which I assume you both are.
Which we are. We're 38 and 38. I just turned 38. You've been 38 for a bit.
And Gen X. Boomers and Gen X had way better pensions, and many were able to sustain their household on one family income. Now many Americans are barely able to stay afloat with 2 household incomes, let alone 1. Social security is a distant fantasy for the younger of us as well. The American dream was real a few decades ago, but unless you grew up here as a boomer or older Gen X, it's now a fallacy. So if you look at the statement on itself, if I think about some of the comments that we're seeing, and if we think about the news reports, I would agree that if you look at a particular demographic on the whole, perhaps the statement is true, that more households now have to rely on at least 2 incomes than before, and that the retirement age is older, and that pensions are not as good as they used to be. So if you take those distinct
individual
statements,
they are all true.
I actually think it's true.
And it's also true in England.
Exactly. So
It's-
actually that's
yeah.
the same. And I actually think a lot of countries, similar Western countries, will be listening to that statement and thinking exactly the same
Yeah.
thing. That is true. We
is
all
true.
now have to rely on two household incomes, and none of us know when we can retire now.
You've just seen in England, they've agreed that they're putting it up by 2 or 3 years and then reviewing it to potentially put it up even further, which just shows you,
Eventually,
there is no
retire.
retirement. So yes, the statement in and of itself is true.
But-
However, it's not necessarily reflective of the entire truth, and for even the majority of people, because I think even within that, just because more people have to do more work and will retire later and don't have good pensions, doesn't mean more other people are in the opposite camp. And I don't know how you're going to structure this video, but we are in the camp of the others. And there will be thousands of people like us. We've also just met a couple of days ago who moved from England, who now live here, who are also in the opposite camp to that. And I think this will be the kind of the tone of the video.
Yes, exactly. So something that we have never really done in any of our videos is bring up race. Actually, a few of our subscribers have pointed it out in defense of some of our comments, but we never bring up race.
Some comments that were made.
To other people.
Yeah.
So they, it's quite interesting. I sit there on an afternoon and have a good download of the comments. But we typically never bring up race in any of our videos. I don't think we've ever felt the need to. But when I read this comment and I thought about the ending of that, where the statement was the American dream essentially not being real unless you were born in the baby boomer generation. And I thought, well, big but here.
Huge but.
Because I then imagined if I was born in 1950, what would my world have been like? Yeah. And my mum was born in 1948. And to give perspective, my mum, in her generation, it was an option to go to school. And actually, I think she had to request as a female and where she was from to go to school. It was actually not common for people like us to be educated and to be able to read and write. So if you ask me...
Or to be allowed to ride the bus or drink water at school.
Or get jobs that were reasonable and have professions. Yeah. So if you ask me the question of whether I was born in the baby boomer generation, do I think I would be better off than I am now? No.
Yeah. The probability of that is, it goes, the further back you go for people like us, the probability decreases. This is where more than one thing can be true at exactly the same time. And we mentioned this a lot in our videos. So not about the race thing, but it depends on perspective, it depends on context. So exactly what you're saying applies to my family. We're from entirely different parts of the world. My family are from the Caribbean. Your family really, although Indian descent, are from Africa, really.
Yeah, so Mauritius.
Yeah, it's a tiny island, but of Indian descent. If we rewind back to the 1940s, the good old days.
I mean, our background with my mum, we were beholden to what the British were doing. So we were being carted off, and so the idea of planning and investments, I don't think our people were thinking about it. We just needed basic things. We needed to be educated and be able to have a decent job, earn a living. And this is the thing that, again, we don't ever touch on in our videos, but you have to have a perspective of how far behind we are. And so when we are talking about the opportunities and we're talking about going from the UK to the US, we are really talking about it from our perspective, knowing that my mum moved to the UK when she was 17 years old with what was available to her. And by the time I was born, I feel very fortunate about the time I was born because I was able to go to school and learn and have what I would feel is the same opportunities as other demographics.
So for us, obviously, as we've mentioned, we're not Americans, so we're having to combine English, British stuff in with the American stuff. From my perspective, it's the American dream represents the ability to, or in fact, not the ability, it's upward mobility. For me, when I look in, I think to myself, what opportunities are available to me and what do those opportunities represent? Well, the opportunities are very high paying jobs with very low taxes. To me, that is the American dream, because what does that allow you to do? Now, we don't have kids, but if we did, we can build a home, We can build those investments that were not available, or not available to us, were harder to come by, not really something our parents would have been thinking about, or our grandparents. We can build up those investments. We can build a pension pot. We then have money to educate our children. We are at the starting point of that. So this idea that the American dream is lost, maybe it's different for a certain demographic from what it was 50, 60, 70 years ago, but it's kind of the beginning for us. And I think it applies in England, although there's not the American dream. Far more Black and Asian people are doing so much better now through education and opportunity and equality and all of those things. Far better. England stunts everybody, so that's a whole different conversation, in that even if you are very educated, you're probably very unlikely to get paid well in a meaningful way. Here, if you're educated or you have a set of skills, of course there's still issues around race and culture and all of that, but there is far more available to you as a person that looks like us than ever before. Every year or every decade that passes, we get closer to the American dream, not further away from it.
From our perspective, because our baseline is so different, and we recognize in the UK what we were speaking about was that it would have been capped. Here you aren't really capped, and we recognize that, of course, that American dream is not necessarily obtainable for everyone, and maybe the people that can have the opportunity to have it is far more larger now, and maybe that's the issue.
I think so. Oh, you think that's the issue?
As in, because there's far more diversity in terms of the amount of people that can go for it, it naturally means that they now have to share.
The competition pool is larger, of course, more people are going to fail, because you now have a pool that's open to everybody in a more or less equal way. I know it isn't, but for the sake of this conversation, it is. Well, you've got to beat 10 million people, not 2. Also, the other part of it is people, or at least from this comment and people that we know, will talk about things missing or it isn't the same as before. One of the things that I always keep in mind, and one of the things I used to talk about when we were at school, is all of my friends that are from a particular demographic, even if they're not wealthy themselves, are one death away from a massive cash injection. Every one of them. Every single one of them. Us, it's the opposite way. We are the cash injection. We are one death away from anything.
Of like wealth, of generations of wealth.
It just doesn't. It isn't a thing for us. So, okay, maybe from one perspective, the American dream is gone. It's a fallacy. Maybe. I don't know that necessarily to be true. On paper, you could write down a statement as to what the American dream was in the 1940s, say it doesn't match up now. But for us, coming from that perspective, and especially coming from, we're not going to get these cash injections, we are definitely closer to that.
Yeah, and we've essentially had to work with what we've had. I've never complained about what the UK has offered us, which often people really miss the mark in what we're trying to get across. We never complain about what the UK offered us growing up. And we also recognize that perhaps in the US today, there are still issues in terms of the equality of education. But we are always, like everyone else, probably selfishly talking about things from our perspective.
Completely. Because you only know things. You only know things until you talk to other people and really get the chance to talk to them and understand. You only know one perspective. So we're not saying somebody else's perspective. We're never saying that. In fact, we're saying it's probably right from their perspective, but this is ours. And for us, having moved, kind of utilizing the UK for everything that it offered, which is the right thing to do. And then we step into a country like this and our salaries increase massively, our taxes go down massively. We now are part of the American consumer society. So yes, we take home more money, but we consume a lot more, and the cycle continues. And if we were to have children, we'd probably send them to schools that we're going to have to pay for. We're probably going to send them to a university that they're going to pay for. They're going to be smarter than us. And so the thing continues.
We want to say a big thank you to the person that wrote that comment, because it gave us the opportunity to really think about something that we'd never really discussed between both of us. No?
Yeah, and never really put on video either.
No, and
so it actually allows us to choose a perspective that we wouldn't, even though we have it, not something that we think about putting out. So that's what it helped with.
Yeah, so thank you. And we would love the viewers to comment below and let us know, what do you think? Had you thought about that aspect before? Do you get what we're saying? Do you disagree? And I'm sure those of you that disagree will let us know. Please do. Thanks for watching.